Hey everyone, welcome back to CreepyCorner stories. You know, diving into the dark web is always risky, but sharing these stories with you makes it worth it. I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Let me know in the comments below. I've noticed that these kinds of stories hit differently depending on where you are. It might even make the experience a little creepier. So, tell me, are you watching from the safety of your home or somewhere less secure? I followed a Reddit thread about Illuminati members meeting in secret. The location matches a restaurant I ate at last week. Okay, so before I even start, I need to clarify something. I'm not the type of person to fall for conspiracy theories. I'm a regular guy in his mid-20s who spends way too much time on Reddit, scrolling through r/ask Reddit or watching dumb TikToks. My life is pretty mundane, with a typical 9-to-5 job, weekends spent at Starbucks with overpriced lattes, and the occasional night out with friends at places like Chili's or Buffalo Wild Wings. Nothing extraordinary, I promise. But last week, something really weird happened, and honestly, I can't stop thinking about it. It all started when I stumbled onto this thread on r/conspiracy. I know, most of the stuff there is totally insane, but I had one of those nights where I couldn't sleep, so I was scrolling aimlessly. The title of the post caught my eye. Have you ever seen the Illuminati in action? I think I did last night. The post was written by someone with a throwaway account, and the OP original poster claimed to have witnessed a secret meeting at an unassuming restaurant just outside of Chicago. They went into all this bizarre detail about how the people at the table were dressed in black suits, barely spoke, and used hand signals to communicate. The post wasn't getting much attention, just a couple of comments calling OP crazy, and maybe one person suggesting they were describing a group of Freemasons instead. But here's the thing, the restaurant OP mentioned, it was the exact same restaurant I ate at last week. Not just the same chain, like Applebee's or something. It was the same location, a little hole-in-the-wall Italian spot called Giovanni's Trattoria in this quiet suburb outside Chicago. My girlfriend and I had gone there last Friday because she wanted to try something different for date night. It was cozy, good food, and nothing felt off at the time. But reading that post, it gave me chills. So, of course, I went to the comments. Someone asked OP to clarify the time and date, and their response? Around 10 p.m. last Friday, the exact same time we were there. My girlfriend and I had left around 10:30. Now, here's where it starts to get really weird. I wanted to prove to myself that this was just some coincidence, so I started going through my own memory of that night. Nothing unusual came to mind, except one thing. There was a back room at Giovanni's. It had one of those wooden employees-only doors, but I remembered seeing a waiter go in and out with a few plates. At the time, I assumed it was just overflow seating, or maybe a private party. I even made a joke to my girlfriend about it being some mafia meeting. She just laughed it off. But looking back now, I realized something odd. No one else went in or out of that room the entire time we were there. No customers, no noise, nothing. And the waiter who carried those plates, I never saw him return to the main dining area after that. That Reddit post sparked something in me, a curiosity I couldn't shake. It felt so random, but also so specific. What were the odds that this thread about a secret Illuminati meeting would mention that restaurant at that time, on the same night I was there? And now that I thought about it, I did remember something else strange. When we walked out to the parking lot, there were 2 black SUVs parked by the curb. I even joked, "Looks like some bigwigs are eating Italian tonight." But my girlfriend told me I watched too many movies. At this point, I was spiraling. Was this a prank? A coincidence? Or had I stumbled onto something bigger without even realizing it? I decided to DM the OP. My message was casual. Something like, "Hey, I saw your post about Giovanni's. I think I was there at the same time you're describing. Can you tell me more about what you saw?" I didn't expect a response, but I got one just a few hours later. The OP's reply was chilling. "If you were there, you're lucky you got out when you did." Okay. What? I stared at that message for what felt like forever. It felt like the kind of thing someone says in a bad horror movie. I tried asking them to elaborate, but they never responded. They deleted their account the next day. Now, at this point, most people would have just dropped it, but I couldn't let it go. Something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me. So, like any sane person, sarcasm intended, I decided to go back to Giovanni's the following Friday night. Alone. Yeah, I know. Dumb idea. But I told myself I just wanted to observe. I wasn't going to do anything reckless. I just wanted to see if there was anything unusual going on. I got there around 9:30 p.m., ordered a beer at the bar, and made myself comfortable. The restaurant wasn't too busy, but I noticed something almost immediately. The employees' only door to the back room was slightly open, not wide enough to see inside, but just enough to make me suspicious. I sat there for almost an hour, nursing my beer and pretending to scroll through Instagram, but my eyes kept darting to that door. Every so often, I'd see someone walk by, a tall man in a black coat, an older woman in a red scarf. None of them were wearing the usual clothes you'd expect from staff or customers. At around 10:15, something happened that made my heart race. The waiter from last week, the one who had taken the plates into the back room, walked out. But this time, he wasn't holding plates. He was holding a briefcase. He crossed the dining area quickly, barely glancing at anyone, and headed straight for the door that led outside. I watched as he exited into the night, my curiosity now completely out of control. What the hell was in that briefcase? I didn't stay much longer after that. I paid my tab and walked out to the parking lot, trying not to look suspicious. And that's when I saw them. 2 black SUVs parked in the same spot as last week. I'll admit, I panicked a little. I got in my car and left as quickly as I could. But as I was driving home, something caught my eye in the rearview mirror. One of the SUVs pulled out of the parking lot and started following me. Okay, so here's the thing. I know how this sounds, and if I hadn't lived through it, I'd think it was a joke too. But when I realized one of those black SUVs was following me, my stomach dropped. It wasn't paranoia. I mean, they were keeping the exact same distance, matching my turns like I was on a GPS tracker. I'm not the kind of person who assumes random strangers are after me, but this wasn't random. Something about the way they drove felt calculated. At first, I tried to play it cool. I told myself, maybe they're just going the same way. But when I turned onto a random residential street for no reason other than to test them, they turned too. That's when I knew. My pulse was going crazy. My palms were slick on the wheel, and my brain was firing off every terrible scenario you can imagine. I pulled out my phone and did what any sane person would. I called my girlfriend. I didn't want to outright say, "Hey, there's an SUV tailing me." So I just said, "Hey babe, stay on the phone with me for a bit. I'm driving home, and something feels off." To her credit, she didn't question it. She's the kind of person who picks up on stuff like this fast, so she just asked, "Are you okay? What's going on?" I didn't answer right away. I was too busy making another random turn onto a side street, and yup, you guessed it. The SUV followed. Not speeding, not aggressive, just eerily consistent. "Okay, so I think someone's following me," I finally blurted out. My voice sounded shaky, even to me. Her response? "What? Are you serious? Go to a public place right now." I was already ahead of her. I spotted a gas station up ahead, a well-lit Shell station with a mini-mart, and pulled in, parking right by the entrance. My hope was that whoever was in the SUV would just keep driving, realize I wasn't worth the effort, and leave me alone. But they didn't. Instead, the SUV slowed down as it passed the gas station. It didn't pull in, but it lingered just long enough for me to notice before driving off down the street. "Okay, they're gone," I told my girlfriend, though I wasn't convinced myself. My voice was still shaky. "Don't go straight home," she said. "Seriously, drive around for a bit and see if they come back." She was right, of course. The last thing I wanted was for whoever was in that SUV to know where I lived. So I stayed parked at the gas station for a few minutes, pretending to scroll through my phone, even though my hands were trembling. The mini-mart cashier was giving me weird looks through the glass door, probably wondering why I wasn't pumping gas. After about 5 minutes, I started to relax. The SUV was gone, and the whole thing was probably just, I don't know, a coincidence. Or maybe I'd misread the situation entirely. I even laughed at myself, trying to shake off the paranoia. But then, just as I was about to leave, I saw it again. The same black SUV. It had circled back and was now parked across the street, idling. Its headlights were off, but I could see the faint glow of the dashboard lights through the windshield. Someone was sitting inside, watching. I froze. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just some random driver. At that point, I wasn't sure what to do. Calling the police felt dramatic, especially since they hadn't technically done anything. But I wasn't about to drive home with them lurking across the street. So I made a split-second decision and walked into the mini-mart. If they were watching me, I figured I'd rather be inside somewhere with cameras and witnesses than alone in my car. The cashier barely looked up as I walked in, so I pretended to browse the snack aisle while trying to peek out the windows. The SUV was still there, parked under a streetlight now. I couldn't see who was inside. Tinted windows, of course, but I could feel their eyes on me. I grabbed a random bag of chips and went to the counter, more for an excuse to stay inside than because I was hungry. The cashier scanned the bag, and I leaned in a little, lowering my voice. "Hey, have you noticed that black SUV out there?" I asked. The guy glanced out the window, shrugged, and said, "Nah, man, I just got here." "Why?" "No reason," I said quickly, not wanting to sound paranoid. "Just looks sketchy." He didn't seem to care, so I paid for the chips and stepped aside, pretending to check my phone again. The SUV still hadn't moved. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I decided to try something bold. I walked to the door, stepped outside like I was heading back to my car, and then abruptly turned and walked around the side of the building, out of their line of sight. I figured if they were really watching me, they'd react, and they did. The SUV's engine roared to life, and I heard the tires squeal as it turned into the gas station parking lot. My heart was racing now. I crouched down behind a dumpster, my phone clenched in my hand, ready to call 911 if I had to. The SUV rolled past slowly, its headlights sweeping over the lot like a searchlight. It was looking for me. After what felt like forever, it drove off again, and I finally came out of hiding. I didn't go back to my car right away. Instead, I stayed inside the mini-mart for another 15 minutes, pacing the aisles and pretending to browse. When I finally worked up the nerve to leave, I didn't see the SUV anywhere. I took the long way home, doubling back and taking random turns just to be sure I wasn't being followed. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was almost midnight, and my nerves were completely shot. But the nightmare wasn't over. When I got inside, I locked all the doors and checked the windows like 5 times. My girlfriend was blowing up my phone with texts, asking if I was okay. I told her I was fine and tried to convince myself that the SUV was just a coincidence, that I was overreacting. Then, around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email. The subject line was blank, and there was no sender listed, just a string of random letters and numbers in the from field. I hesitated for a second, then opened it. The email contained just one sentence. "You shouldn't have gone back to Giovanni's." I stared at the screen, my blood turning ice cold. I had no idea how they got my email. I didn't use it to reserve a table at Giovanni's, and I hadn't given it out to anyone recently, but somehow they knew who I was, and they were watching. To be continued. I didn't sleep that night, not even a little. I kept checking the email over and over again, as if the words would somehow change or explain themselves, but they didn't. The sentence just sat there, staring back at me. "You shouldn't have gone back to Giovanni's." My first thought was to delete it. My second thought was to forward it to the police. But then I stopped myself. I didn't even know what I'd say to them. "Hi, I think a restaurant I ate at might secretly host Illuminati meetings, and now someone is threatening me." Yeah, that would go over well. I decided to keep the email, just in case. I flagged it and moved it into a folder I labeled weird stuff. After that, I spent the rest of the night pacing around my living room, checking the windows every 5 minutes, like a lunatic. Every time a car drove by, my heart jumped into my throat. What freaked me out the most wasn't just the email itself, but the implication of it. They knew who I was. They knew I'd gone back to Giovanni's. And worst of all, they knew how to contact me. The next morning, I was running on fumes. My girlfriend called around 9 a.m., and when I told her about the email, she freaked out. "Why didn't you call me last night?" she demanded. "I didn't want to scare you," I said, which was a total lie. The truth was, I didn't know how to explain any of this without sounding like I'd completely lost my mind. "Well, you need to go to the police," she said, "like right now." "And tell them what?" "That someone followed me, sent me a creepy email, and might be in the Illuminati. They'd laugh me out of the station." She didn't respond right away, but I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end of the line. Then she said, "What if you're in danger? Like real danger?" That thought had crossed my mind more times than I wanted to admit, but I kept brushing it off, telling myself it wasn't possible. I wasn't important enough to be in danger. I was just a random guy. Why would anyone care what I did? But then again, why did they care? I decided to take her advice, at least partially. I didn't go to the police, but I did spend the day trying to be extra cautious. I took my laptop to a Starbucks and started going down the rabbit hole, trying to figure out if anyone else had experienced something similar. I searched Reddit first. Nothing. Then I tried Googling keywords like Giovanni's Trattoria Illuminati and secret restaurant meetings. Most of what I found was clickbait articles and conspiracy theory videos on YouTube. You know the kind, grainy photos of the Eye of Providence, spooky background music, and narrators talking about how the elites control everything. It all felt ridiculous, but one video caught my attention. It was about a series of mysterious disappearances connected to small, unassuming restaurants across the US and Europe. According to the video, these restaurants all had one thing in common: rumors of secret, late-night meetings involving high-profile figures. And guess what? Giovanni's Trattoria was on the list. At this point, I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. I couldn't decide if I was being paranoid or if something genuinely sinister was going on. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled onto something I wasn't supposed to see. That evening, I decided to clear my head and go for a drive. I didn't have a destination in mind, just a need to get out of my house. I told myself it was just to calm my nerves, but deep down, I think I wanted to see if the SUV would show up again. I cruised around for about an hour, blasting music to drown out my thoughts. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and I was starting to feel a little more at ease. But then, as I was driving down a quiet stretch of road on the edge of town, I noticed something in my rearview mirror. A black SUV. At first, I thought it was just another car, but the more I paid attention, the more I realized it was following me. It stayed a few car lengths behind, moving at the exact same speed I was. When I turned onto a side street, it turned too. When I switched lanes, so did it. My stomach sank. It was happening again. I didn't want to panic, but my hands were shaking on the wheel. I remembered something I'd read online about how to tell if someone is following you. Take 3 consecutive right turns. If they're still behind you after that, it's not a coincidence. I tried it. First right turn, check. Second right turn, still there. Third right turn, yup, they were still on my tail. At this point, I was officially freaking out. I decided to head for the busiest place I could think of, the Walmart Supercenter on the edge of town. I pulled into the parking lot, which was packed with cars, and parked as close to the entrance as I could. The SUV pulled in too, but it didn't park. Instead, it circled the lot slowly, like it was looking for something, or someone. I sat in my car, heart pounding, watching as it made a full loop around the lot. Then it drove off, disappearing into the night. I didn't go home right away. I sat in the Walmart parking lot for almost an hour, trying to convince myself I was safe. But the more I thought about it, the less safe I felt. Whoever was in that SUV wasn't just messing with me. They were watching me. When I finally got home, I decided to take some extra precautions. I covered the webcam on my laptop, turned off the GPS on my phone, and even dug out an old flip phone I hadn't used in years, just in case. I didn't know if it would make a difference, but it made me feel a little better. Then, just as I was about to go to bed, my phone buzzed. It was another email. Same blank subject line, same sender with the random string of letters and numbers. But this one was worse, much worse. It was a photo of my house, taken from across the street. I dropped my phone like it was on fire, my heart racing so fast I thought I might pass out. Someone had been outside my house, watching me. Maybe even while I was sitting in my car, thinking I was safe. Underneath the photo was was another message. Stop digging, or we'll make you disappear. I didn't sleep that night again. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined someone standing outside my window, watching me, just like in the photo. Every little sound in the house, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the fridge, made me jump. I sat on my couch, every light in the house turned on, holding a baseball bat I dug out of the closet like it would somehow protect me from, I don't even know what. The thing is, the more I thought about it, the more terrified I became. This wasn't just some random stalking incident. They'd sent me a photo of my house. That meant they weren't just following me. They knew where I lived, and they wanted me to know they knew. At 3 a.m., I finally broke down and called my girlfriend. She picked up on the first ring, probably because she'd been just as anxious as I was. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "No," I said. "They sent me a picture of my house." "What?" she practically yelled. "Oh my God, you need to go to the police right now." I hesitated. "And tell them what? That some shadowy group of people might be stalking me because I ate at a restaurant where I wasn't supposed to see something. They're not going to take me seriously." Her voice softened. "Okay, but you can't just sit there and do nothing. What if they come back?" That was the part that scared me the most. I didn't know what stop digging even meant. I hadn't done anything, just read a stupid Reddit thread and gone back to Giovanni's out of curiosity. But whoever these people were, they clearly thought I'd seen or learned too much. The only problem was, I didn't even know what I was supposed to have seen. The next morning, I decided I couldn't just sit around waiting for something to happen. I called in sick to work, which wasn't entirely a lie, considering I was a wreck, and drove to my girlfriend's apartment. It felt safer being with someone else, and I wasn't about to stay home alone after the email. As soon as I got there, she practically dragged me inside and locked the door behind me. "Okay," she said, pacing around her living room. "We need to figure out what's going on. Start from the beginning." I told her everything about the Reddit thread, the waiter with the briefcase, the SUVs, the emails. She listened carefully, her expression shifting from worried to downright terrified as I went on. When I finished, she sat down next to me and said, "There's got to be something we're missing, something you saw or heard that they don't want you to remember." I shook my head. I've been going over it in my head nonstop, and I can't think of anything. I didn't even see inside the back room. "Okay, but what about the Reddit thread?" she asked. "Did you save it?" I hadn't, but I'd taken a screenshot of the post before it was deleted. I pulled it up on my phone and showed it to her. The post didn't say much, just a vague description of the meeting at Giovanni's and a warning to stay away. But as we read through it together, she noticed something I hadn't. "Wait," she said, pointing at the screen. "What's that username?" I looked. The OP's username had been something random, like Deep Truths 556, but the more I stared at it, the more familiar it looked. I remembered seeing a similar username pop up in another subreddit, a post about weird disappearances in Chicago. I pulled up Reddit and started digging, searching for anything related to the username. After a few minutes, I found it. It was an old post from r/unresolved mysteries titled, "Has anyone noticed strange patterns in Chicago's missing persons cases?" The post was over a year old and mostly speculation. Someone claiming that certain missing persons seemed to vanish near specific locations, usually late at night. One of the locations mentioned, Giovanni's Trattoria. At this point, my girlfriend was just as freaked out as I was. "This can't be a coincidence," she said. "There's something about that restaurant, something they're hiding." I nodded, my mind racing. "But what do we do about it? If we keep digging, they're just going to come after me again." Her face went pale. "What if they're not just watching you anymore?" I froze. "What do you mean?" She pulled out her phone and opened her Ring doorbell app. "Look at this," she said, turning the screen toward me. The video feed showed her front porch, recorded the night before. At around 1:30 a.m., a figure appeared on the screen, a tall man in a dark coat, standing just outside the camera's range. He didn't knock or try to open the door. He just stood there for a solid 2 minutes before walking away. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to scare you," she said, echoing my own words from earlier. "But now I think it's connected." By this point, it was clear we couldn't just sit around and wait for something else to happen. We needed answers, and there was only one place to get them: Giovanni's. We agreed to go back that night, but this time, we weren't going in blind. We stopped at a hardware store and picked up a few supplies: a flashlight, a small pocket knife, and a cheap burner phone. I didn't know what we were expecting to find, but I wasn't about to show up empty-handed. When we arrived at Giovanni's, it was almost 10 p.m. The restaurant was quiet, just like before, with only a few cars in the parking lot. We parked across the street and watched for a while, trying to spot anything unusual. At first, everything seemed normal. Customers came and went, waiters moved between tables, and nothing looked out of the ordinary. But then, around 10:30, the pattern changed. The front door opened, and 2 men in black suits walked in. They didn't look like customers. They weren't dressed for a casual night out, and they didn't even glance at the menu posted by the door. They just walked straight to the back of the restaurant, disappearing behind the employees-only door. We waited, watching the door like hawks. 15 minutes later, another man arrived, carrying a black briefcase. He didn't speak to anyone, didn't look around, just walked in and headed straight for the back. My girlfriend and I exchanged nervous glances. "This is it," she whispered. "Whatever's going on, it's happening back there." We waited a few more minutes before getting out of the car. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it in my ears. The plan was simple: go inside, act like customers, and see if we could get a closer look. If things got weird, we'd bail. We walked in and were greeted by the same cozy atmosphere as before. Soft lighting, Italian music playing in the background, the smell of garlic and fresh bread. A hostess smiled at us and asked if we wanted a table. "Actually," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "do you have any private rooms available?" Her smile faltered for just a second. "Private rooms?" "Yeah," I said casually. "I heard you have a back room for private parties. Thought we'd check it out." Her expression froze, and she glanced over her shoulder toward the employees-only door. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "That area is reserved for special events." "Special events?" my girlfriend asked, her voice dripping with suspicion. Before the hostess could answer, a tall man in a black coat stepped out from behind the door. He didn't say anything, just looked at us with cold, piercing eyes. And then he smiled. The man's smile was the kind that sent a chill down your spine. It wasn't friendly or welcoming. It was like he knew exactly who we were and why we were there. My instinct screamed at me to turn around and leave. but I froze, unable to move. My girlfriend grabbed my hand, and I could feel her grip tighten. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his voice calm and measured, like he was trying to lull us into a false sense of security. No," I stammered. "We were just looking for a table." The man's smile widened slightly. "You won't find what you're looking for here." Before I could respond, he turned and walked back through the employees-only door, shutting it firmly behind him. The hostess, who had been watching the whole exchange, now looked visibly nervous. "Maybe you should come back another time," she said quietly, her eyes darting toward the door, like she was afraid he might return. I nodded quickly, mumbling something about a misunderstanding, and we turned to leave. My girlfriend was practically dragging me out of the restaurant, her face pale as a ghost. We stepped outside into the cold night air, but instead of going back to the car, we'd stopped by the side of the building. My girlfriend grabbed my arm, her voice a harsh whisper. "We can't just leave." "What are you talking about?" I hissed. "Did you see that guy? He knows something." "They all do." "Exactly," she said. "If we leave now, we'll never figure out what's going on. And after everything they've done, following you, sending that email, showing up at my house, we can't just let this go." Her determination was stronger than my fear, and against my better judgment, I agreed. "Fine," I said, "but if anything feels off, we're out of here. No hesitation." She nodded, and we made our way around the back of the building. The alley behind Giovanni's was dark and eerily quiet. A single security light buzzed overhead, casting long shadows against the brick walls. There was a delivery door at the back of the restaurant, and next to it, a small window covered by heavy blinds. We crept toward the window, careful not to make any noise, and pressed our ears against the glass. At first, all I could hear was muffled voices. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but there were at least 4 or 5 people talking. Then, after a few moments, the voices stopped, replaced by the sound of something sliding across a table. A briefcase, maybe. My girlfriend nudged me and pointed at the blinds, motioning for me to peek through. I hesitated. If they caught us, there was no way we'd get out of this unscathed. But curiosity got the better of me. I reached up slowly and lifted one corner of the blinds, just enough to see inside. What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. The room was small, with walls painted a dull gray and a single overhead light casting harsh shadows. In the center of the room was a long wooden table, and seated around it were 6 people, 3 men and 3 women, all dressed in black. They weren't eating or drinking. They weren't even talking. They were just sitting there, perfectly still, staring at something on the table. I squinted, trying to see what they were looking at, and that's when I noticed the symbols. The table was covered in a series of intricate carvings, circles, triangles, and lines that connected in patterns I didn't recognize. In the center of the table was an object that looked like a small stone box, covered in the same strange symbols. One of the men reached forward and placed his hand on the box. The room seemed to grow darker, even though I was outside, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, like something terrible was about to happen. Then he opened the box. I don't know how to describe what I saw next. It wasn't light or smoke or anything physical. It was more like a presence, something that spilled out of the box and filled the room. The air around them seemed to ripple, and their faces twisted into expressions of pure ecstasy, like they were in the presence of something divine or horrifying. And then, One of them looked directly at me. I don't know how he knew I was there. I hadn't made a sound, and the window was too dark for them to see through, but his head snapped toward me with terrifying precision, his eyes locking onto mine like a predator spotting its prey. His mouth moved, and though I couldn't hear the words, I knew exactly what he was saying. Run. I dropped the blinds and grabbed my girlfriend's arm. We have to go. Now. She didn't argue. We bolted down the alley, our footsteps echoing against the brick walls. Behind us, I heard the sound of the delivery door creaking open, followed by hurried footsteps. They were coming after us. We reached the car and jumped in, locking the doors just as a figure emerged from the alley. It was the man in the black coat, his expression calm and unreadable. He didn't run toward us. He didn't yell. He just stood there, watching as I fumbled with the keys and started the engine. As we sped out of the parking lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror. He was still standing there, his silhouette growing smaller as we drove away. But just before we turned the corner, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were more of them. At least 6 figures stepped out of the shadows, all dressed in black, all watching us leave. And then, as if on cue, they turned and walked back toward Giovanni's, disappearing into the night. We didn't go home that night. We checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town, too scared to stay anywhere they might find us. I didn't sleep, and neither did my girlfriend. We just sat there, replaying everything that had happened, trying to make sense of it all. By morning, we agreed on one thing. We couldn't go to the police. Not yet. Whoever these people were, they were powerful enough to follow us, track us, and threaten us, without ever leaving a trace. Reporting them wouldn't stop them. It would only make things worse. The next day, I deleted all my social media accounts, switched to the burner phone, and moved in with my girlfriend temporarily. We avoided Giovanni's and anything even remotely connected to it, and for a while, things seemed to calm down. But then, last night, I got another email. It was blank, except for one line. "We warned you." Attached to the email was a photo. It was taken from the motel parking lot, showing me and my girlfriend sitting inside the room. They know where we are, and I don't think we can run this time. I found a secret version of Facebook on the dark web. It includes profiles of celebrities who supposedly died decades ago. Alright, so let me start by saying this. I'm not some kind of tech wizard or a hacker. I'm just a guy who watches way too many creepy YouTube videos late at night. You know, the kind where people explore the dark web, tell ghost stories, or dive into unsolved mysteries. It's weirdly comforting, until it isn't. Anyway, about 2 weeks ago, I was up at like 3 a.m. scrolling Reddit, as you do, when I came across a post on our unresolved mysteries. The thread was about strange dark web rumors, stuff like red rooms, conspiracy theories, and hidden corners of the internet where time stands still. Most of it sounded like the usual edgy nonsense, but one comment caught my attention. It mentioned something called Faceless Book. I wish I'd taken a screenshot of the comment, because it disappeared the next day, but I remember it clearly. The user said it was some kind of secret version of Facebook that had been floating around the dark web since the early 2000s. They claimed it had profiles of people who either didn't exist, were long dead, or had some sort of alternate history. There were no likes, no comments, just profiles. And according to this random Redditor, the The whole thing felt like staring into a parallel dimension. Of course, my sleep-deprived brain decided this was the exact kind of rabbit hole I needed to dive into. I'd never actually accessed the dark web before, but I'd heard enough to know the basics. Download Tor, don't click on anything sketchy, and for the love of God, never ever use your real name. It took me a couple of hours to figure out how to set it all up. My setup was hilariously amateur. An old laptop I hadn't used since college, my neighbor's unprotected Wi-Fi, don't judge me, and zero understanding of what I was actually doing. After fumbling around with .onion links, I found myself on a forum called The Abyss Exchange. It was like Craigslist for weirdos. There were posts offering counterfeit passports, strange art, even some genuinely disturbing stuff I don't feel comfortable mentioning. But in the midst of all that chaos, I saw it. A post titled, "Faceless Book Access Key, Verified Safe." The post was cryptic, just a single sentence. Unlock the past that never existed. Trust is earned, not given. It had a download link, and my gut was screaming at me to stop. But you know that little voice in your head that says, "What's the worst that could happen?" Yeah, I listened to that voice. The file was tiny, just a few megabytes. It was a standalone program, which seemed sketchy as hell, but curiosity had fully taken over by this point. I ran it, and my screen immediately went black. No loading bar, no confirmation pop-up, just darkness. For a second, I thought I'd bricked my laptop. Then a single line of text appeared. "Welcome to Faceless Book. Are you ready to remember?" YN. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I was already regretting my decision, but at the same time, my heart was pounding with excitement. It felt like I'd stumbled into something I wasn't supposed to see, like the internet equivalent of finding a hidden trapdoor in an old house. I typed Y and hit enter. The screen flashed, and suddenly, I was staring at what looked exactly like early 2000s Facebook. I'm talking the classic blue and white layout, the chunky font, even the old school logo with the square edges. But it wasn't Facebook. There was no login page, no search bar, no news feed, just a single profile. The profile picture was in black and white, grainy, like an old mugshot. The name? James Dean. Yeah, that James Dean. The actor who died in a car crash in 1955. Except, according to the bio, he was alive. And it said he'd updated his profile last week. That's when things got really weird. I don't know what I was expecting when I clicked on the profile, but it sure as hell wasn't this. The page loaded with the kind of sluggishness that made me think my laptop was about to give up on life. When it finally appeared, it was normal, if that makes sense. Like, it looked like an actual Facebook profile from 2008, just one frozen in time. There was a black and white photo of James Dean leaning against some classic car, staring off into the distance like he was posing for a photo shoot. His name sat right under it in bold letters, James Byron Dean. The first thing that struck me was the About section. Instead of listing a workplace or school, it just said, actor, dreamer, lost in the in-between. The location was tagged as somewhere off Highway 466, which was creepy because that's where he died in his infamous car crash. And the birthday? February 8th, 1931. The guy had been dead for almost 70 years. This had to be some weird prank, right? But then I saw the status update. It wasn't a regular Facebook status with emojis or hashtags. This one looked like an old blog post written in plain text. No likes, no comments, just this eerie little note. The little bastard doesn't run anymore, but sometimes I still hear the engine humming at night. The headlights cut through the fog, just like they did on that last ride. I wonder, did I ever really make it to the other side? I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. The little bastard was the nickname of James Dean's Porsche 550 Spider, the car he was driving when he crashed. Whoever made this page had done their homework, but the way it was written didn't feel like some internet troll trying to mess with me. It felt personal, like he was talking directly to me. The worst part, the status was dated December 8th, 2023, just a week ago. Okay, so at this point, my brain was doing backflips trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe it was some kind of ARG, alternate reality game, or maybe I'd stumbled into some weird roleplay community on the dark web. But before I could think too hard about it, I noticed a small button at the bottom of the page. View connections. I clicked it. The screen glitched for a moment, like an old VHS tape rewinding too fast. Then a list of profiles appeared, each one as bizarre as the last. Marilyn Monroe. Status: diamonds are overrated. The lights in the tunnel? Not so much. Last. Updated October 14th, 2023. Kurt Cobain status: sometimes I dream of the forest. It always smells like teen spirit. Last updated November 27th, 2023. Amelia Earhart status: the horizon is endless, but the ocean never forgets. Last updated December 1st, 2023. There were dozens more: Jim Morrison, Elvis Presley, even JFK. Every profile had the same layout, the same hauntingly poetic statuses, and the same recent updates. It was like scrolling through a graveyard where the dead weren't quite gone. I clicked on Marilyn Monroe's profile, and immediately her page loaded with an almost intrusive level of detail. There was a gallery of black and white photos, some of which I recognized from old magazines. But then there were others, color photos, ones I'd never seen before. In one, she was sitting at what looked like a Starbucks, not a vintage diner or a retro cafe, a modern-day Starbucks with the familiar green logo glowing in the background. She was holding a latte, her signature smile frozen in place. The caption read, "A blonde in a new world. Everything tastes the same, yet nothing feels real." My hands started sweating. There was no way this was real. No way. But whoever made this had gone to insane lengths to make it feel real. I mean, the photo was perfect, grainy enough to look authentic, but sharp enough to make me question everything. I couldn't tell if it was some kind of AI-generated image or something worse. Then, I scrolled down and saw the most recent post. It was just 3 words, but they hit me like a punch to the gut. "You're here too." I slammed the laptop shut. My heart was racing, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I know it sounds dumb, but in that moment, it felt like the screen was staring back at me, like something on the other side knew I was watching. I paced around my apartment, convincing myself it was just some elaborate hoax. Maybe it was some viral marketing stunt for a new horror movie or something. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. There were no logos, no links, no hashtags. And why use the dark web? This wasn't something you stumbled across by accident. Someone, or something, wanted to make sure only the right people found it. And for whatever reason, that included me. I couldn't stop myself. About an hour later, I reopened the laptop and went back to the program. This time, the homepage loaded with a message. "Welcome back. Don't look too long, or they might see you. Great. That wasn't ominous at all. There was a new tab at the top of the page. Connections nearby. My stomach dropped. This wasn't Facebook anymore. This was something else. Something alive. I clicked the tab, and a single profile popped up. It wasn't a celebrity this time. It was a photo of me. The profile picture was from my Instagram, a photo I'd posted months ago of me standing outside a McDonald's with my friends. Except this version was wrong. The colors were muted, like it had been taken under a flickering streetlight. And the caption wasn't the one I'd written. It said, "You never left." I don't think I've ever felt the kind of dread I felt when I saw my own face staring back at me on that screen. The photo wasn't anything special, just me standing outside a McDonald's late at night, holding a drink and grinning like an idiot. It was one of those casual snapshots someone else took and tagged me in on Instagram. But here's the thing, I never uploaded that photo anywhere else. It was buried deep in my profile, and my account wasn't even public. And the caption, "You never left." What the hell was that supposed to mean? I clicked on the profile, and sure enough, it was a perfect replica of me. My name, my birthday, even the cringy bio I'd written years ago. Aspiring graphic designer, lover of bad puns and worse decisions. Everything was accurate, down to the last detail. Well, almost everything. The timeline was different. Instead of the usual memes and posts about random stuff, there were only 3 entries, each more unsettling than the last. The first one was a photo. It was a grainy image of my bedroom, taken from the corner near my closet. The shot was wide enough to capture my bed, the desk where I was sitting right now, and the faint glow of my laptop screen. The caption read, "How long have you been here?" My stomach turned. I didn't even need to check. I knew this photo wasn't on my real Facebook or Instagram. It wasn't on my laptop or phone either. Someone had taken this picture without me knowing, and from the angle, it looked like it had been taken earlier that night. The second post was a video. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. At first, it was just static, the kind you see on an old TV when there's no signal. But then the image started to clear. It was me, sitting at my desk, wearing the exact same clothes I had on right now. The video wasn't pre-recorded. It was a live feed. I watched, frozen, as the me on the screen turned and looked directly into the camera. The movement was unnatural, like a glitch in a video game. My face looked wrong, pale, expressionless. And then, slowly, I saw my doppelganger raise a hand and point toward the closet behind me. I swear, I stopped breathing. My closet door was shut, but now I couldn't help imagining what might be behind it. I kept telling myself it was just a trick, some kind of deep fake or augmented reality thing designed to mess with me. But the timing was too perfect. Without even realizing it, I'd started shaking. My brain was screaming at me to shut the laptop and run, but I couldn't. I was locked in place, staring at the screen. That's when I noticed the third post. It was just text this time, but somehow it was worse than the photo or the video. Knock, knock. As soon as I read those words, I heard it. Knock, knock. 2 soft taps coming from inside my closet. I jumped out of my chair so fast, I almost knocked the laptop to the floor. My breathing was so loud, I could barely hear anything else, but the knocking didn't stop. It was steady, rhythmic, like whoever or whatever was in there wanted me to open the door. I stood there, frozen, my heart hammering in my chest. Every logical part of me was screaming to grab my keys and get the hell out of my apartment. But there was this horrible curiosity gnawing at me. I kept thinking, what if it's nothing? What if I'm just losing it? But deep down, I knew better. I don't know how long I stood there staring at the closet, but eventually, the knocking stopped. I thought that was the end of it, until my laptop screen flickered again. A new message had appeared on the profile. It's rude to ignore visitors. At that point, fight or flight kicked in, and flight won by a landslide. I grabbed my keys and bolted out the door, not even bothering to lock it behind me. I didn't stop running until I was halfway down the block, standing under a streetlight and trying to catch my breath. I called my friend Max. He's one of those tech-savvy guys who builds his own PCs and talks about cybersecurity like it's a hobby. If anyone could make sense of what was happening, it was him. When he picked up, I didn't even let him get a word in before I started rambling. Dude, I screwed up. I went on the dark web, found this weird version of Facebook, and now it's... Wait, slow down, Max interrupted. You went on the dark web? Are you insane? Yeah, I know, I snapped. Just listen. There's this program called Faceless Book, and it... The line went dead. At first, I thought Max had hung up on me, but then I heard it. This faint, crackling static, like an old radio struggling to tune into a station, and underneath the static, there was a voice. It was soft, barely audible, but I swear it was saying my name. Max? I whispered. No response. Just more static. I pulled the phone away from my ear, and that's when I saw the notification. Unknown caller. Incoming video chat. My hand started shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. I don't know why I answered it, but I did. The screen lit up, and for a split second, I saw what looked like my own bedroom. The camera was pointed at my closet, which was now wide open, and then the feed cut to black. I didn't go back to my apartment that night. I ended up crashing on Max's couch after pounding on his door and half yelling that I was being cyber-stalked by ghosts. He thought I was joking at first, but when I showed him the program on my laptop, his face went pale. "Where the hell did you find this?" he asked, scrolling through the profiles. He stopped when he got to mine. This isn't normal, man. This isn't just some virus or ARG. This feels..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "What?" I demanded. "What does it feel like?" Max stared at the screen for a long time before finally answering. "Like it's alive." We spent hours trying to figure out what to do, whether to delete the program, wipe the laptop, or just smash it with a hammer and call it a day. But before we could decide, the screen flashed again. "You can't run forever." The laptop shut itself off. That was 2 days ago. Max doesn't want anything to do with me now, and honestly, I don't blame him. But the program, it's still on my laptop, and every time I open it, there's a new profile. Last night, it was my mom's. Her status? "It's so cold here." I didn't sleep, not after seeing her profile. The image wasn't some old photo I'd uploaded to Facebook or shared in a family group chat. It was a live shot. My mom was sitting at her kitchen table, staring straight into the camera, her expression eerily blank. She was still wearing the same cardigan she had on the last time I visited her house, which was over a month ago. The caption beneath her name read, "It's so cold here. Why haven't you come home?" I tried calling her immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely tap the screen on my phone. The line rang once, twice, and then nothing. The call disconnected before it even went to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. By the 5th attempt, my throat was dry, and my chest felt like it was caving in. That's when I noticed something on the profile page, a timestamp at the bottom of the photo. It wasn't from last night, or even earlier in the week. It was marked, taken, December 15th, 2024, 3:27 a.m. That was 5 minutes ago. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and the baseball bat I kept under the couch, then bolted out the door. Max had told me to stay away from the laptop, to let this whole thing go, but this wasn't just about me anymore. If this faceless book thing had somehow targeted my mom, I needed to find out how and why. Her house was a 20-minute drive from my apartment, but I swear, it felt like hours. The whole time, I couldn't stop glancing at my phone, half expecting another call or message to pop up. Every streetlight looked dimmer than usual, and even the other cars on the road seemed to keep their distance, like the world itself was trying to warn me to turn back. When I finally pulled into a driveway, the house was completely dark. No porch light, no glow from the windows, just silence. I stepped out of the car, gripping the bat so tightly my knuckles ached. The air was freezing, and I could see my breath clouding in front of me as I made my way to the front door. I knocked once, then twice. No answer. I was about to knock again when I realized something. The door wasn't locked. I pushed it open slowly, every creak of the hinges sending shivers down my spine. The house smelled wrong, not rotten or metallic, like you'd expect in a horror movie. Just wrong, like the air itself had gone stale. "Mom?" My voice echoed through the empty space. No response. The kitchen was the first place I checked. It looked exactly like it had in the photo on the profile page. Same table, same chair, same cardigan draped over the backrest. But my mom wasn't there. The table wasn't empty though. There was something sitting in the center. A single sheet of paper, folded neatly in half. My name was scrawled across the front in my mom's handwriting. I unfolded the paper and read the message inside. It was short, just 3 sentences. "I can hear them now. They found me, and they won't let me leave. Please, don't come looking for me." That's when I heard the footsteps upstairs. They weren't loud, more like a soft, deliberate creaking on the floorboards above. But they weren't random either. It was a pattern. Step, step, pause. Step, step, pause. I should have run. I knew I should have run. But something inside me wouldn't let go of the possibility that it was her, that she was still here, hiding, waiting for me to find her. I tightened my grip on the bat and headed for the staircase. Each step up felt heavier than the last. The creaking from above had stopped, but that only made it worse. The silence was suffocating, pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't shake off. When I reached the top, I froze. The hallway was empty, but the door to my mom's bedroom was open just a crack. There was no light inside, just darkness spilling out like ink onto the floor. I pushed the door open, my pulse hammering in my ears. The room was empty, just like the kitchen, but there was one thing that didn't belong. My laptop. It was sitting on her nightstand, the screen glowing faintly in the darkness. I swear to God, I didn't bring it here. It should have still been back at Max's place. But there it was, humming softly, like it had been waiting for me. I approached it slowly, half expecting it to explode or something equally insane. When I finally looked at the screen, the homepage of Faceless Book was open. My mom's profile was still there, but now there was a new status update. "He's here." Before I could even process that, a notification popped up at the top of the screen. "You have one new connection." I clicked it without thinking, and the page that loaded made my blood run cold. It was a profile of me, but not the one I'd seen earlier. This one was different. The profile picture was taken right now. It showed me standing in my mom's bedroom, staring at the laptop, with the cracked door behind me wide open. I whipped around, swinging the bat blindly. The door was still closed, but I could feel something in the room with me. Not see it, feel it. The kind of presence that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. The screen flickered again. It's rude to ignore visitors. The closet door behind me creaked open. I ran. I don't even remember how I made it back to my car, but I didn't stop until I was on the highway, speeding toward Max's place. My phone buzzed non-stop the entire drive, but I couldn't bring myself to check it. Not until I was safely locked inside his apartment with every light on. When I finally looked, there were dozens of notifications, all from Faceless Book. Every single one was the same message. You can't save her. You never could. I didn't sleep that night. Max didn't either, once I showed him what happened. We tried shutting the laptop down, but it wouldn't turn off. He even unplugged it and took out the battery, but the screen stayed on, the same message burning into the screen like a scar. You can't run forever. The next morning, the laptop was gone. I don't know how or when it disappeared, but it left behind one thing: a piece of paper on Max's desk. It wasn't handwritten. It was typed in the same eerie font from Faceless Book. Your next connection is waiting. You know where to find her. Max tried to talk me out of it. He practically begged me not to go back to my mom's house. But what choice did I have? The message was clear. This wasn't going to stop until I followed the trail. And if there was even the slightest chance of finding her, I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. Still, I wasn't stupid enough to walk into this unarmed. I stopped by a hardware store on the way and picked up a crowbar and a heavy-duty flashlight. The clerk gave me a weird look when I paid, probably because I was sweating bullets, but I didn't care. By the time I pulled into my mom's driveway, the sun was starting to set, casting long, jagged shadows across the yard. The house was still dark, still silent, but something felt different this time. The air was heavier, like the place was holding its breath, waiting for me to step inside. I hesitated at the front door, my hand hovering over the doorknob. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe another note, another cryptic message. But the door opened easily, just like before. The same stale, lifeless smell hit me as I stepped inside, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest like a drumbeat. I called out, "Mom?" My voice barely echoed this time, swallowed up by the oppressive quiet. And then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from the basement. Now, let me be clear. I didn't even know my mom used the basement. She always said it was just an old storage space that hadn't been touched in years. Growing up, she wouldn't even let me go down there, claiming it was too dangerous. But as I stood in the hallway, staring at the door that led downstairs, I realized I didn't have a choice. The basement door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a steep staircase that plunged into darkness. The tapping grew louder, more deliberate, like whatever was down there wanted me to follow it. I flicked on my flashlight and started down the stairs, the metal crowbar gripped tightly in my other hand. Each step groaned under my weight, the sound echoing through the narrow space. The deeper I went, the colder it got, until I could see my breath puffing out in tiny clouds. The smell was worse down here too, damp and earthy, with an undercurrent of something sour, something rotting. When I reached the bottom, my flashlight beam swept across the room, revealing stacks of old boxes broken furniture and cobwebs that hung like curtains. And then I saw it. The laptop. It was sitting on an old wooden table in the middle of the room, its screen glowing faintly. Beside it was something that made my stomach drop. A small pile of Polaroid photos. I approached slowly, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The photos were spread out in a neat fan, each one showing a different angle of the basement. There were shots of the staircase, the walls, the table, and me. The last photo was the worst. It showed me standing exactly where I was now, staring down at the photos on the table, with the same look of terror frozen on my face. I whipped around, expecting to see someone or something standing behind me, but the basement was empty, just shadows and silence. The laptop let out a soft chime, drawing my attention back to the screen. A new notification had appeared. You have one new connection. My throat tightened as I clicked it. The profile that loaded wasn't my mom's. It wasn't mine either. It was Max's. His profile picture was a recent one, taken at his desk, probably within the last week. He was grinning, holding up a can of Red Bull like he was about to stream on Twitch or something, but his expression seemed off, forced. The status below his name read, "You shouldn't have brought him into this." I felt a cold wave of panic wash over me. I grabbed my phone and dialed Max's number, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again, but it was no use. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment, the basement was plunged into darkness. When the beam steadied, I noticed something new on the screen. A live feed. It was Max's apartment. The camera was angled toward his front door, which was wide open. The apartment itself looked trashed, like someone had ransacked the place. Papers were scattered across the floor, furniture overturned, and the laptop we'd been using was gone. And then, movement. At first, I thought it was Max, but the figure that stepped into view wasn't him. It was me. Not just someone who looked like me. It was me. Same clothes, same face, even the same crowbar I was holding. My double turned toward the camera, its face twisting into a grin that didn't belong on my face. And then slowly, it raised a hand and waved. The laptop screen glitched, the live feed cutting to static. When the image returned, it wasn't Max's apartment anymore. It was the basement. And once again, I was in the frame. Only this time, the shot wasn't coming from the laptop. It was coming from behind me. I spun around, swinging the crowbar blindly. The air felt thick, suffocating, like the darkness itself was alive. The tapping started again, louder now, echoing from every corner of the basement. My flashlight flickered wildly, the beam cutting through the shadows like a strobe light. And then I saw them. They were standing just beyond the edge of the light. Dozens of them, maybe more. Their faces were pale, featureless, like the static you see on an old TV. They moved in unison, closing in, their heads tilting unnaturally, as if trying to study me. I stumbled back, tripping over the table and falling hard onto the concrete floor. The laptop screen was the only source of steady light now, casting a cold, blue glow across the room. The figures stopped just short of it, their bodies shuddering like they were struggling to hold their shape. The screen flickered one last time, and a new message appeared. "You're one of us now." Before I could react, the figures lunged. Epilogue, the final update. That was 3 days ago. I woke up in my apartment, sitting at my desk with the laptop in front of me. Max is gone. My mom is gone. And the faceless book program? It's still there, waiting. Every time I open it, there's a new profile. Sometimes it's someone I know. Sometimes it's someone I don't. But the statuses are always the same. They're here, they're waiting. And the worst part? Now there's a second profile of me. It doesn't have any posts, not yet. But I know it's only a matter of time. I discovered a private Zoom call promoted on the dark web. The participants were celebrities discussing a ritual involving my town. Alright, before I get into this, let me preface by saying I'm not one of those hardcore conspiracy theorists. I don't think the moon landing was fake or that celebrities are secretly lizard people. I'm just a regular guy who spends way too much time on the internet when I should be sleeping. But this, what happened a few nights ago, I don't even know how to explain it. It was one of those nights where my brain just wouldn't shut off. You know how it is when you've scrolled through TikTok so much your thumb cramps, and even YouTube's algorithm starts throwing random crap at you because it's run out of ideas. I'd already cycled through the usual rabbit holes, creepy YouTube stories, crime podcasts, and a sprinkle of Reddit drama. But by 2 a.m., I was deep in the weird part of Reddit, the kind of threads where people argue about things like whether birds are secretly government drones, or if the pyramids were built using alien laser technology. You get the vibe. That's when I stumbled on this post in r/deep web. Now, for context, I've never gone super deep into the dark web. I've read stories about it, sure, like the ones about red rooms or hitman sites, but I'd always assumed most of that was exaggerated or just plain fake. My experience with it was more like dipping my toes in the kiddie pool. I've clicked on a couple of links, browsed some forums, nothing crazy. Mostly just out of boredom and curiosity. Anyway, the post I found wasn't super flashy. No creepy title like "Don't click this link" or "You'll regret it." It was short and simple. Want to see what they don't want you to see? Classic bait, right? But something about it felt different. There wasn't the usual wall of text warning you about how dangerous it was or boasting some outlandish claim. It was just a single link and the words, "Don't stay too long." I should have left it alone. I know I should have left it alone. But something about that post, it was like an itch I couldn't scratch. I mean, what could it hurt to just check it out? Worst case, I figured it'd be some poorly designed site selling fake passports or illegal DVDs. Best case, I'd have a mildly interesting story to tell my friends later. So, like an idiot, I opened up my Tor browser, pasted the link, and hit enter. The site itself wasn't what I expected. A lot of dark websites looked like they were designed by a teenager in the early 2000s. Clunky layouts, broken links, text in weird colors. But this one was clean. Almost too clean. The homepage was just a simple black screen with white text that said, "Welcome? Proceed with caution." Below that, there were a few forums, each with vague titles like The Unseen, Eyes Wide Shut, and Phase 33. I clicked around for a bit, but most of the threads were nonsense. Stuff like how to manipulate moonlight patterns, or the Vatican's underwater archives. It felt like some ARG, alternate reality game, for hardcore conspiracy nuts, and I almost closed the browser. But then I noticed a thread pinned to the top of the Eyes Wide Shut forum. It was called Special Invitation, Live Tonight. The description was short. Exclusive access to the truth behind fame and power. Meeting starts at 3 a.m. EST. Discretion is mandatory. There was a Zoom link at the bottom. Now, I don't know what possessed me to click that link. Maybe it was the boredom, or maybe it was the fact that I've always had this weird attraction to things I know I shouldn't be doing. But whatever it was, I clicked, and it brought me to a Zoom waiting room. The screen was pitch black, except for a message in white text that said, "Meeting starts at 3 a.m. EST. No screenshots, no recordings. Violators will be found." Violators will be found? I actually laughed out loud at that part. It was so over the top, it felt ridiculous, but at the same time, it kind of gave me chills. I figured it was just part of the IRG vibe they were going for. Still, I muted my mic, turned off my camera, and decided to wait. I passed the time scrolling on my phone, occasionally glancing at the screen. It was dead silent, except for the occasional faint beep when someone else joined the waiting room. I couldn't see anyone's names or faces, just the same black screen with the creepy message. By 2:58, I was starting to second guess myself. The whole thing felt like a waste of time. But before I could leave, the screen flickered and the meeting started, and that's when things got weird. The first few people to join didn't seem out of the ordinary. Their cameras were off, and their usernames were generic, stuff like Observer003 and Silent Guest. But as more people joined, things started to feel off. A few of the participants turned their cameras on, and I swear, I recognized some of their faces. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then someone joined who looked exactly like this huge A-list actor, like the kind of guy whose face is plastered all over Marvel movie posters. He didn't say anything, just sat there with this weird blank expression, his camera tilted slightly upward so you could only see part of his face. Then another person joined, and my stomach dropped. It was a woman who looked just like a certain pop star. You'd know her. She's been on every magazine cover and just headlined the Super Bowl halftime show. She was wearing a hoodie, and her face was half shadowed, but it was definitely her. One by one, more familiar faces popped up. Actors, musicians, influencers, you name it. Some of them left their cameras off, but others didn't bother to hide their identities. They weren't joking around or chatting like you'd expect from a celebrity Zoom call. They were just waiting, silent, still. That's when the host joined. The username just said, "Moderator." His camera stayed off, but his mic crackled as he spoke. "Welcome," he said. His voice was calm, almost robotic. "Thank you for your discretion. Tonight's agenda is critical, and we don't have much time." The participants stayed silent. No one even moved. "We'll begin with the ritual assignments," the moderator continued. "Group leaders, please confirm your locations." That's when my gut twisted. One of the participants, a man who looked eerily like a rom-com actor from the early 2000s, leaned forward and spoke. "Our site is secured. Preparations are 80% complete." "Good," the moderator replied. "Proceed as scheduled. The proxy will be in place by tomorrow." I didn't know what any of it meant, but something about the way they talked, so calm, so matter-of-fact, made my skin crawl. It felt like I was watching the planning meeting for some kind of cult, but it wasn't just their words that unsettled me. It was the way they kept glancing at the camera, almost like they were looking at me. And then, one of them said something that made my heart stop. "The town of my town's name. It's ready." The moderator paused. "Status?" "We've secured the site," the man replied. "The decoy will be in place by tomorrow night." "Excellent," the moderator said. "Ensure compliance. The ritual cannot proceed without public misdirection." I froze. They'd just said the name of my town, a small, middle-of-nowhere place that barely shows up on a map. What were they talking about? What ritual? What decoy? None of it made sense, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stumbled onto something I wasn't supposed to see. And then, as if they could sense my fear, the moderator spoke again. "To our silent observers," he said, his voice colder now, "we hope you're enjoying the show. Don't worry, your role will become clear soon enough." I don't remember how long I sat there staring at the screen. It was like my brain had short-circuited, trying to process what I was seeing. They'd mentioned my town, my tiny, boring town, and I couldn't figure out how or why it was relevant to anyone, let alone a Zoom call full of celebrities and people who seemed way too comfortable talking about rituals. But I didn't leave. I should have left, but I didn't. It was like my body refused to move, like my curiosity had locked me in place. Maybe I was hoping they'd say something that made all of this make sense, something that would let me laugh it off later. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't going to end with me chuckling about some weird performance art piece or an ARG. The screen flickered and more participants joined. The number of people on the call had to be over 50 now. A few more turned their cameras on, and with each new face, the pit in my stomach grew deeper. I recognized them, not just vaguely, like, oh, I've seen this person in a random Instagram ad. No, these were faces everyone knows. There was a tech billionaire who's constantly on Twitter stirring up drama, a political figure who's been in the news every other week for the past decade, a YouTuber who just hit 20 million subscribers. It was like someone had plucked people from every corner of fame and thrown them into this bizarre call. None of them looked like themselves, though. Sure, their faces were the same, perfect jawlines, perfectly styled hair. But there was something wrong. Their expressions were too stiff, their movements too calculated, like they were puppets being controlled by invisible strings. And their eyes were what really got me. There was no life in them, just a cold, dead emptiness that made my skin crawl. "Begin phase 1, the moderator said, his voice breaking the silence. His camera was still off, but he spoke with this unsettling authority, like he was used to being obeyed without question. One of the celebrities leaned forward, tapping at something off-screen. A new window popped up in the corner of the Zoom call, a map. It was a live feed, like something out of Google Earth, but way more advanced. It showed dozens of locations highlighted in red, scattered across the globe. My eyes darted around the screen, and that's when I saw it. My town. It was lit up, glowing like a blood-red beacon. The pop star, the one who'd been sitting silently this whole time, spoke up. Her voice was soft, almost melodic, but there was no warmth in it. Site 12 is confirmed. We'll be operational by 3:33 a.m. Good, the moderator replied. Ensure the necessary components are in place. There's no margin for error. I had no idea what they were talking about, but hearing the name Site 12 made my skin prickle. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were talking about my town like it wasn't even real, like it was just a pawn in some twisted game. And what was going to happen at 3:33 a.m.? Why that exact time? The conversation moved on, but my brain was stuck. All I could think about was that map, and the way my town's name seemed to hang in the air like a curse. I'd always thought of it as the most boring place on earth. We have a Walmart, a Starbucks, and maybe 2 decent restaurants, tops. It's the kind of town you drive through without even noticing. But to them, it was Site 12, a target, and they were planning something. The discussion started to get even weirder. They weren't just talking about my town anymore. They were listing off other places, small towns, obscure neighborhoods, even landmarks. One of them mentioned some remote island in the Pacific. Another brought up a seemingly random diner off Route 66. "What about proxy placement?" asked a man who sounded like he'd swallowed a box of gravel. His camera was off, but his voice had this slow, deliberate tone, like he enjoyed making people nervous. "Proxies are compliant," the pop star replied, her lips curling into a faint smile. "They've been conditioned for weeks, no deviations reported." "And the media assets?" the moderator asked. A different celebrity, one who's been in every Netflix thriller for the past 2 years, leaned forward. "Influencer packages are ready. We've got pre-scheduled uploads across TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. The distraction campaign will saturate all platforms." That hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just that they were talking about manipulating social media. It was the casual way they did it, like it was no big deal, like it was just another line item on their to-do list. "Phase 2 requires controlled visibility," the moderator continued. "No viral anomalies. Keep the narrative consistent." "Understood," the YouTuber said with a nod. "Engagement metrics are pre-staged. By the time they notice, the ritual will already be underway." Ritual. There it was again. I felt like my chest was caving in. This wasn't some ARG or internet prank. These people, these famous people, were talking about real plans. They were plotting something, and I was stuck here, listening to it like an idiot. But then it got worse. One of the participants, an actor who starred in this year's biggest action movie, spoke up. "What about the observers?" The moderator's tone shifted. It was colder now, sharper. "Observers are accounted for. They'll be handled if necessary." "Handled?" the actor pressed. The moderator didn't hesitate. "You know the protocol. They're irrelevant." The actor nodded, and that's when I noticed something. He wasn't looking at his screen. He was looking directly into his camera. And for the first time since the call started, I felt like someone was looking back at me. My hands were shaking. My laptop felt like it was burning a hole in my lap, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was sure I'd muted my mic and turned off my camera before joining the call. But what if I hadn't? What if they knew I was here? I glanced at the participants list, scanning for my username, but it wasn't there. At least, I didn't think it was. My head was spinning, and my vision was starting to blur. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to leave, but I couldn't bring myself to click the button. It felt like if I moved, if I so much as breathed, they'd notice me. The moderator's voice broke the silence. "To those observing from the shadows," he said, his tone dripping with condescension, "we hope you're enjoying the show. Don't worry, your role will become clear soon enough." I swear to God, it felt like he was talking directly to me. My blood turned to ice as I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst. And then, without warning, the Zoom call ended, just like that. The screen went black, and I was kicked back to my desktop. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at my reflection in the darkened screen. I wanted to believe it wasn't real, that I'd just stumbled onto some elaborate prank or weird art project. But I couldn't shake the feeling in my gut, the feeling that I'd just seen something I was never supposed to see. And worse, the feeling that they'd seen me too, I don't remember closing my laptop, but somehow it was on my desk the next morning, the lid shut tight. For a moment, I thought it might have been a bad dream. You know, one of those weird, vivid nightmares that leaves you feeling off the next day. But when I opened my browser, the Zoom app was still there, sitting in my taskbar, like a reminder that none of it was in my head. The memory of that meeting replayed in my mind like a broken record. The map, the way they talked about my town, like it was just another stop on some screwed-up checklist. The phrase, handled if necessary, kept echoing in my ears. It didn't help that my town actually felt different that morning. I didn't realize it right away, but there was this tension in the air, the kind of thing you can't see, but you feel. People seemed quieter, distracted. Even the cashier at Starbucks, who usually chats up everyone like she's running for mayor, just handed me my coffee with a quick nod before turning away. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, that I was overthinking everything, but that was before the SUV. It showed up that afternoon. I was driving to grab lunch from this tiny mom-and-pop burger place when I spotted it. This black SUV with tinted windows, idling near the corner of Main and 3rd. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, SUVs aren't exactly rare, even in a small town like mine. But something about this one felt wrong. The way it was just sitting there, perfectly still, made my skin crawl. It wasn't parked, either. The engine was running. I could see the faint shimmer of heat waves coming off the hood in the afternoon sun. Whoever was inside wasn't moving. I told myself to ignore it, but my eyes kept drifting to the rearview mirror as I drove away. The SUV didn't follow me, but that didn't make me feel any better. It felt like it wasn't just there by coincidence. It felt like it was watching. When I got home, I decided to dig into this whole ritual thing. Maybe it was stupid to go back online after what I'd already seen, but I needed answers. The dark web was out of the question. I wasn't about to risk another meeting like that. But I started searching keywords on regular forums, stuff like ritual sites and celebrity conspiracies. Most of what I found was the usual garbage: Illuminati memes, badly photoshopped pictures of Beyoncé with devil horns, and long-winded rants from people who clearly needed to step away from the keyboard. But after a couple of hours of digging, I found something that made my heart stop. It was a thread on a conspiracy subreddit, buried under a ton of other posts. The title was simple: The List. The post itself was short, just a screenshot of a text file. The user claimed it had been leaked from some secret forum on the dark web. The file was a list of names, all tied to specific towns and locations. Some of the names were crossed out, with notes like complete or removed. The locations were all over the place: small towns, random suburbs, even a few cities, but one name wasn't crossed out. One town wasn't marked complete. It was mine, and right next to it, in bold letters, was a single name: mine. I stared at the screen for so long, my eyes started to burn. It didn't make sense. How could my name be on that list? How could they even know who I was? I'm nobody. I don't have a huge online presence. I'm not an influencer or some tech genius. I'm just a regular guy in a nowhere town. But there it was, clear as day. My name, right next to my town. The whole thing felt like a punch to the gut. It was like the walls of my life were closing in, like the anonymity I'd taken for granted was suddenly gone. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe someone else with my name lived here. Someone important. Someone they were actually targeting. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself, the feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I couldn't stop picturing the way that actor had looked into his camera, the way it had felt like he was staring through the screen right at me. I knew I had to tell someone. But who? The police? What was I supposed to say? Hi, I think some celebrities are planning a ritual in my town, and also I might be on a hit list. Yeah, that'd go over great. They'd probably check me into a psych ward before I even finished the sentence. I decided to text my friend Chris instead. He's the kind of guy who's always ready to call out BS when he sees it, and I figured he'd either talk me down or at least help me figure out what to do next. Me. Hey, weird question. Ever hear about a ritual involving our town? Chris. LOL, WTF? You been watching YouTube rabbit holes again? Me. Seriously, just humor me. Chris. Not really, unless you count the time someone claimed the Dairy Queen was cursed. Why? I hesitated. How was I supposed to explain any of this without sounding crazy? Me. I found some stuff online. Made it sound like something's supposed to happen here. Something bad. Chris. Like what? Me. I don't know yet, but I think it's happening soon. There was a long pause before he replied. Chris. All right. Now you're freaking me out. What exactly did you find? I started typing out a response, trying to summarize the Zoom call without sounding like I'd lost my mind. But before I could hit send, my phone buzzed with another message. It wasn't from Chris. It was from an unknown number. Unknown number. Stop looking. I stared at the message, my heart pounding in my chest. I hadn't posted anything online about what I'd seen. I hadn't told anyone but Chris. How did they know? How could they possibly know? I typed out a reply, my fingers shaking. Me. Who is this? No response. A few minutes later, another text came through. Unknown number. You've seen enough. Stay out of it. I didn't reply after that. I didn't have to. The message was clear. Whoever they were, they knew I was digging, and they wanted me to stop. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of my house, every gust of wind against the window felt like a threat. I kept checking the front door, making sure it was locked. Around 3 a.m., I peeked out the window, and that's when I saw it. The SUV was back. This time, it was parked right across the street, its headlights off, but the faint glow of a phone screen lit up the driver's seat. Someone was sitting inside, watching. I don't know how long I stood there, staring out at the dark street, but one thought kept repeating in my head like a mantra, louder and louder until I couldn't ignore it anymore. They know who I am, and worse, they know where I live. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the weight of that SUV sitting across the street, like it was some predator waiting for me to make the wrong move. I kept thinking about the texts, the list, the Zoom call, and how everything seemed to be spiraling closer and closer to me. By the time the sun came up, I was still sitting on my couch, clutching my phone like it was some kind of lifeline. Chris had sent a few messages after I ghosted him, asking if I was okay, but I didn't respond. How could I explain that I'd gotten a warning from some shadowy figure who somehow knew I was digging where I shouldn't? Chris wouldn't understand. Hell, I didn't even understand. I spent most of the day holed up in my house, paranoid about every little noise. A package truck drove by at one point, and I practically dove behind the couch. I kept peeking out the window, trying to see if the SUV was still there. It was gone by mid-morning, but that didn't bring me any relief. If anything, it was worse not knowing where it was. At around 5 p.m., I decided I needed to get out of the house. Sitting in the dark with my thoughts was just making everything worse. So, I grabbed my keys, stuffed my phone in my pocket, and headed for the only place I thought might feel normal. The McDonald's in town. I don't know what I was hoping to find there. Comfort food, maybe. A sense of normalcy. But when I pulled into the parking lot, my stomach sank. The black SUV was parked in the back corner of the lot, angled just enough so that the driver had a clear view of the entrance. I froze, my hand hovering over the gear shift. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to drive away, but instead, I killed the engine and got out. If I kept running, I'd never stop. I couldn't let them see me scared. At least that's what I told myself. Inside, the McDonald's was almost empty. Just a couple of teenagers in a booth, scrolling through their phones, and an older guy at the counter arguing about his order. I walked up, ordered a coffee I didn't even want, and sat at a table near the window. From where I was, I had a perfect view of the SUV. It hadn't moved. The windows were so dark I couldn't see inside, but I knew someone was there, watching. I pulled out my phone, scrolling aimlessly just to look busy, when I noticed something strange. Every time I refreshed Instagram, the same ad kept popping up. It was for some exclusive live stream happening at midnight. The caption read, "See the truth behind the veil." I clicked on it out of reflex, but it just took me to a broken link. The ad didn't have a company name or any branding, just a picture of a black circle with an eye in the center. It looked eerily familiar, but I couldn't place it. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of it. It was another text from the unknown number. Unknown number. Last chance. Stay home tonight. My blood ran cold. My first instinct was to look around the restaurant, half expecting to see someone watching me. But the teenagers were still glued to their phones, and the guy at the counter had moved on to complaining about napkins. No one looked suspicious. I glanced back at the SUV. It still hadn't moved. Me. Who are you? I hit send and stared at the screen, waiting for a reply. None came. When my coffee was ready, I grabbed it and walked out, trying to act as casual as possible. The SUV didn't follow me home, but I could still feel its presence, like an invisible weight pressing down on me. That night, I barricaded my front door. It felt ridiculous, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. I double-checked the locks on every window, shoved furniture against the back door, and even grabbed a kitchen knife, just in case. By 11 p.m., my paranoia had reached a boiling point. I couldn't sit still. I kept pacing the living room, checking my phone every few minutes. That stupid Instagram ad kept popping up, taunting me with its broken link. And then, at exactly 11:57 p.m., I got another text. Unknown number. Midnight. You'll understand. A chill ran down my spine. I stared at the message, half expecting my phone to ring or another text to come through. But nothing happened. Just those 3 words. You'll understand. I glanced at the clock. 11:59. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like my ribs were going to crack. And then, at midnight, the power went out. I froze, the darkness swallowing me whole. The only light was the faint glow of my phone screen, which was now buzzing with notifications. Dozens of them, all from random apps. Instagram, TikTok, even ones I hadn't used in years. Each notification said the same thing. Live now, the truth behind the veil. I clicked on one of them, and my phone opened a live stream. The screen was pitch black at first, but after a few seconds, the image flickered to life. It was my town. The camera was set up on a hill overlooking Main Street. The feed was shaky, like it had been filmed with a handheld camera, but the view was clear. The streets were empty, lit only by the faint glow of the streetlights. But something was wrong. There was a faint hum in the background, low and droning, like the sound of an engine idling. And then I saw them, a group of people, all dressed in black, walking down the middle of the street. They moved in unison, their heads bowed, carrying something between them. It was hard to make out at first, but as the camera zoomed in, my stomach twisted. It was a box. Not just any box. It looked ancient, covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dark. The hum grew louder as they carried it toward the center of town, where a large circle had been drawn on the pavement, in what looked like chalk. No, not chalk, salt. I couldn't look away. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped my phone. The group placed the box in the center of the circle, and one of them stepped forward, pulling back their hood. It was the pop star, the same one from the Zoom call. She raised her hands, and the hum turned into a deafening roar. The stream glitched for a moment, the image distorting, but when it cleared, the box was open, and something was crawling out. I don't know how to describe what I saw. It wasn't human. It wasn't even alive. It was this mass of shadows, twisting and writhing like it was trying to take shape. The pop star began to chant, her voice echoing through the streets, and the thing in the box started to grow. I wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, trapped by the screen in front of me. And then the live stream cut off. For a moment, I thought it was over, but then I heard it, the same hum from the stream, low and droning, coming from somewhere outside. I rushed to the window, my heart in my throat, and that's when I saw it. The SUV was back, and this time, it wasn't alone. The hum was everywhere now, vibrating through the walls and floor like the whole house was alive. My hands gripped the windowsill so tightly, it felt like my fingers might break. Outside, the SUV sat idling in the driveway, its headlights off, but I could see the faint blue glow of a laptop screen in the driver's seat. And there were more of them. 2 other SUVs were parked at the end of the street, their shapes barely visible in the dark. Figures were stepping out, moving silently, their silhouettes blending into the night. I counted 6, then 8. They were all dressed in black, hoods pulled tight over their heads, just like the people in the live stream. I ducked away from the window, heart pounding. My mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. Why here? Why me? But there wasn't time to think. Whoever they were, whatever they wanted, they were coming. I grabbed my phone and bolted for the back door, but as I reached it, a loud knock echoed through the house. It wasn't frantic, like someone who needed help. It was slow, deliberate. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I froze. Another knock. Harder this time. The sound reverberated through the empty house, making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down and saw a new text from the unknown number. Unknown number. Don't run. It'll only make things worse. I stared at the message, my breath hitching in my throat. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but before I could type anything, the front door creaked open. They were inside. I backed away, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure they could hear it. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls like a swarm of bees. I turned and sprinted down the hallway, throwing myself into the bathroom and locking the door behind me. My mind was racing. I had to call someone, anyone, but when I tried to dial 911, the call wouldn't go through. It just kept disconnecting, the line cutting out before I could even hear it ring. My phone buzzed again. Another text. Unknown number. It's too late. Watch. The bathroom lights flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. The only light came from my phone screen, casting long, shaky shadows across the tiles. I didn't want to look, but my thumb moved on its own, opening the text. It was another link to a live stream. I didn't want to click it. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to put the phone down, to smash it if I had to. But my fingers disobeyed. The stream opened, and there it was again. The view of my town, but this time it wasn't empty. The group from before was gathered in the center of Main Street, their black robes blending into the darkness. The box was still there, but now it was glowing, pulsing with an unnatural light that seemed to twist and ripple the air around it. The thing inside was larger now, no longer just a writhing mass of shadows. It had begun to take form. It was tall, impossibly tall. Its limbs stretched and contorted like they'd been pulled too far. Its face, or what I assumed was its face, was a void, an absence of light that seemed to swallow everything around it. And its eyes, I can't describe its eyes. They weren't even eyes, not really. Just 2 points of nothingness that pierced through the screen and straight into me. The robed figures were chanting again, their voices low and rhythmic, rising and falling like waves. The sound made my skin crawl, like it was burrowing under my flesh. And then, one of them stepped forward. It was the pop star again. Her face was serene, her movements almost graceful as she raised her hands to the creature. She said something. I couldn't make out the words, but whatever it was, the thing responded. It turned toward the camera, toward me. My phone glitched, the image distorting as the hum in the house grew louder. I dropped it, stumbling back as the bathroom door rattled on its hinges. They were trying to get in. No, 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 I whispered, scrambling for something, anything, to defend myself. My hands found the shower rod, and I yanked it down, clutching it like a bat. The door rattled again, harder this time, and then it stopped. Silence. For a moment, all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing, shallow and ragged. I waited, the shower rod trembling in my hands. The hum was still there, faint now, like it was coming from far away. I crept to the door and pressed my ear against it, straining to hear. Nothing, just the quiet hum and the faint creak of the house settling. I reached for the lock, my fingers trembling. Part of me knew it was a mistake, but I couldn't just stay there forever. I turned the lock, opened the door, and came face to face with them. They were standing in the hallway, their hoods casting shadows over their faces. There were 5 of them, maybe 6. I couldn't tell. The world felt like it was tilting, the edges of my vision blurring. The one in the front stepped forward, tilting their head like they were studying me. "You shouldn't have watched," they said. Their voice was distorted, like it was coming from a broken radio. I stumbled back, raising the shower rod, but they didn't move. They just stood there, silent, waiting. And then, all at once, they stepped aside. Behind them, the creature from the live stream was there. It didn't walk. It just was, like it had stepped out of the shadows themselves. The air around it felt heavy, oppressive, and its void-like eyes bore into me, pulling at something deep inside. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. My body felt like it was trapped in cement, my mind spiraling into a black hole of fear. The creature reached out, its limbs stretching unnaturally, and for a moment, I thought it was going to touch me, but it didn't. Instead, it reached past me, its fingers brushing against the mirror behind me. The glass rippled like water, and in an instant, the creature was gone. When I turned back, so were the figures in black. The hallway was empty, silent, except for the faint hum that was now fading into nothingness. I stumbled out of the bathroom, my legs weak and unsteady. The house was exactly as I'd left it, but something felt wrong. The air was heavier, the shadows deeper, like the place had been tainted by whatever had just happened. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the night after either. The SUV disappeared, but I still feel like I'm being watched. Every time I pass a reflective surface, I swear I see something move out of the corner of my eye. And the hum is still there, faint, waiting. I don't know what they did to my town, or why they chose me. But one thing's for sure. Whatever they started that night, it isn't over